Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. You may or may not have seen Mandy Horvath's story. Well, before she was a double amputee and a viral sensation, she was an ordinary 21-year-old navigating the maze of life. Well, Mandy joins us this morning to talk about her incredible journey. Mandy, good morning and welcome to the OPT Network.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Carlette. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And so, Mandy, before all of the pomp and circumstance that is now your life, you were 21 years old trying to figure this thing called life out. Take us back to your 21-year-old self before you lost your legs.
Yeah, I was very active in the outdoors. I spent a lot of time out foraging, fishing, hunting. I was a pretty successful chef, and I worked very hard. One night I went out with people that I thought I could trust, and I had 2 beers and 2 shots, and I woke up in an ambulance. I was taken out to Steel City, Nebraska, and we were supposed to be camping. I was awake in the ambulance and unaware and in shock of what was happening. And I was informed that I had just lost my limbs. I had been struck by a locomotive around 2:30 in the morning. I had died there in the ambulance the first time. I died again in life flight. And the third time I died on the surgery table at Bryan West Medical Center in Lincoln, Nebraska, as Dr. David Samani and Dr. Reginald Burton worked tirelessly in the morning to get me stabilized. And so I became a bilateral above knee amputee. It is...
Tell me about that night, though, when you were out with people that you thought you could trust and you were doing probably what any 21-year-old might be doing. Do you have a recollection of how you got to a railroad track?
No, ma'am.
Even to this day, when you think back to that day, nothing?
Nothing.
What about the people that were with you?
People that were with me, it is my date of that night. He had claimed to be down at the bar when this incident occurred, but it wasn't until August of that year that the train conductor was allowed to release his statement to my family and I, and he met us at Madonna Rehab Facility. And the way he had expressed it is he was going around the bend about 45, 50 mile an hour. And he saw me and he thought I was a mannequin. I was apparently laid across the tracks in the rest in peace position. And this is apparently a prank that is pulled in rural communities out in Nebraska. And he hit me, realized I was not a mannequin, slammed on the brakes. But obviously it takes a minute for coal trains to stop. As he was getting down out of the engine room, he said that he took 2 steps to get down from the engine house, and he clicked on his flashlight. And as he turned to the left to go and find me, he got a tap on his shoulder. And it was my date of that night. He said, "Hey man, why did you stop?" And the train conductor had responded something to the liking of, "I think I hit somebody. I don't have time for this," and went off to go and find me. And my date of the night apparently said, "I hope it's not me."
Wow.
He found me crawling out from underneath the 8th coal car, and I had apparently Superman flipped myself over on the rocks. And that I have no recollection of any of this moment. He said that he had worked tourniquets to try to stop the bleeding long enough until paramedics could arrive. And that was about that. So
do you think you just passed out I mean, because in your mind's eye now, could you feel the weight and the propulsion of the train as it literally rolled over you?
I have no recollection of any of this. To this day, Carlette, I suffer from PTSD, but I have massive gaps in what actually happened that night. I mean, I remember stepping outside and that's it. I don't remember the train hitting me. The things that I dream about, I mean, oddly enough, wet rocks.
Wow.
It's a little eerie when you know it's your blood. I don't. I have what other people have told me and what I know to be true. And that's about all I have to go off of.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 beers and 2 shots that night. It wasn't an amount to
make you so inebriated that you wouldn't know that you had gone and lain on railroad tracks.
Absolutely. It wasn't enough to incapacitate me to that degree. And so I do believe, and my family and many others come to the same conclusion that it's a possibility that I was incapacitated by a date rape drug. And I believe that. I have no other explanation for why there is a massive gap in what happened that evening. I don't know.
The conductor is really a huge hero in this story, isn't he?
Absolutely. He got me stabilized enough to the point where I could get to the paramedics. I was actually in the ambulance whenever, the only recollection that I do have is in the ambulance when I had woken up, but it's not much. Obviously, the light was very bright. I couldn't see who was standing above me, but I was being slapped as hard as possible. And this individual was telling me, "Hey, you've got to stay with me. You've got to stay with me. The helicopter's on its way." And I was in shock. I'm very stubborn. I'm very strong. I was very strong-willed then. And I defiantly, I'm going to go home. I'm fine. I tried sitting up. He slammed me back down on the gurney and started putting a cervical collar around my neck. And it was at that point I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm going to go home. And this dude, gentleman, excuse me, he said, "No, ma'am, you've just lost your legs. I'm really going to need you to stay with me and calm down." And
so had your legs been just decapitated at that moment? They were just gone from your body already?
Yes, ma'am. It's to my understanding they never even found one of my legs. Yeah. So after he had informed me of this, I still was in shock. I had no idea. I tried to move again, but he had strapped me to the gurney. And it was at that point I lifted the bottom half of my limbs and kicked in the air. And that was when I really realized this is real. It was very obviously light. You don't realize how heavy your limbs are.
Wow.
And then there's the blood. And they started putting actual medical tourniquets on me at that point, and I faded out very quickly. It was an intense moment, and that's all I have.
Wow. Let's take a break here. We're back with more of Mandy's incredible triumph over what should have been death right after this. Our guest this morning is Mandy Horvath, and we're talking about her incredible journey to life when probably most people thought that she wouldn't live. And if she did live, what would her life be like? Well, we're talking about the triumph. But before you get to triumph, you've got to go through a lot. And so Is anybody ever prosecuted? Is the so-called date, is he prosecuted for what it was obvious that they were there while you lay on that train track? Was anybody brought to justice?
I, and here's where things get even more interesting. He would come and visit me in the hospital. And my mother started to recognize that he was telling the police one thing and my family another about where he was at and what the train conductor had to say and everything else. And in November of that year, my mother and I had tried to get this case reopened, and we suspect that it's not even a suspicion. He was very good friends with police there in the area. And in November of that year, I was being checked in for an emergency surgery to be re-amputated. I got a phone call from a mutual friend who was frantic and crying, and she told me that he had killed himself.
He killed himself.
That is what I was told. Now, it's been 6 years. And the coroner fought for an accidental death. This man was a heavy equipment operator who accidentally parked his truck in a garage and left it running, expecting to live. I'm a product of 2 truck drivers. My dad's a diesel mechanic, and that's probably one of the first things you learn not to do.
Wow. What is
if that's an accident, I don't know. I don't know.
What does that do? What does that do to your spirit? What does that do for you? Because there's such a big gap there, even 6 years later, of the role that he played in this.
You know, I have too much love to give to continue to focus on the negative parts of that. I loved him. I cared about him as a friend, and I don't I don't fathom that anybody truly has those kinds of intentions, but you never really know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just let it go.
Mm-hmm. Were you able to forgive him for whatever role that he played?
Absolutely. You know, there would be no mental clarity in my life without that.
Mm-hmm.
I could forever spend my days trying to track down and figure out exactly what had happened, who was where, who said what.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to do me any good. It's been 7 years, Carlette, and for some reason I can't get a police report of the incident.
Wow.
You know, some things I guess are just better left in the past. I have a beautiful life, and I really believe that forgiveness is something that is necessary to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Were there times when you questioned why you had lived?
Absolutely. There were several times, you know, I questioned why had I lived, why, you know, everything that I did in my previous life, so to speak, it was geared around my limbs. I was, you know, in track. I was in winter guard, color guard. Just I spent more time out in the woods than I did, you know, anywhere else. And
so do you get mad at the universe for this atrocity that's been perpetrated on you that is really no fault of your own?
Not anymore. You know, I moved to Colorado in 2016. It took a very long time to rehabilitate from my amputations. And of course, I had to be re-amputated. Unlike a normal amputee, they could not just sew me up and use skin grafts. So they had to use a product called A-cell stem cell. And so every Tuesday and Friday for the better part of a year, I went through debridement surgeries where they would go in and take the decroded tissue off and apply this A-cell stem cell. What it's meant to do is generate muscle, skin, and tissue growth, and it worked fabulously. But I had a whole, my legs were totally exposed and raw. And so it is my belief that this A-cell stem cell did get attached to my bone. I became less than 0.0% of all amputees worldwide who experience osteoregeneration. And what that means is my body literally started to regrow bone. It's very fascinating, but not not what is needed for the world of walking and prosthesis and continuing a healthy life as an amputee. And so what they had to do is they had to go back in and take off that bone and try to sew me up. And of course, I still was not in a position where I could be sewn up. So those sutures and staples ripped, and I ended up back in the hospital for another 3-week stint, getting a bunch of Bactrim pumped into me and fighting through an infection. But I made it through that. At one point, I was on 22 different medications a day, some multiple times a day for phantom pain, which is a neurological condition where you experience pain where your residual limbs used to be. So I can still feel my toes, which is kind of a weird concept.
Wow. What do they feel like?
Imagine sitting on your ankles for about 20 minutes and getting them to start falling asleep. It feels like that, only the whole leg all the way up. And oftentimes I'll get static electric shocks that rock my world and make me kind of do a little rabbit thump with my leg here. But it's gotten tolerable. Like I said, I moved to Colorado in 2016. I had ditched all of the pharmaceuticals. In fact, today I can't and I don't even take ibuprofen. I rely solely on medicinal marijuana.
Is that why you moved? Is that why you moved to Colorado?
It is not, but it definitely has been a huge influence and made a massive impact on my life as far as living with pain or anything like that. So moved to Colorado in 2016 and I weighed 150 pounds without legs. And prior to losing my limbs, I weighed about 115. So I gained quite a bit of weight. I was very depressed. I was often suicidal. And like you were saying earlier, often questioning why. I didn't really have any family out here. I didn't have much support. And so jokingly, half not jokingly, I decided to make a post out on Instagram one day in April. And I had asked, just the general public if anybody would go with me to ascend the Manitou Incline. I had a lot of skeptical responses and speculation as to what I was actually trying to do or going to do.
Did people think that you were going there to try to take your life?
No. They understood that I wanted to try and crawl the stairs, but nobody really believed or reached out to me or offered to go with me. And I had asked just about everybody in this town
Why did you want it to ascend the Manitou? What was that about for you internally?
Internally, it was about getting back out in the woods. I grew up in the Midwest in Missouri, and it was a very integral part of my life to be out fishing and hunting, and that's how we fed my family. You know, it just I really missed being outside and being outdoors and being in the woods. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of option for people in wheelchairs.
Sure. And so when you start thinking about this climb with no legs, how does your mind process how that will happen?
I had no idea what I was getting into or what I was trying to do, to be quite honest with you.
Mm-hmm. So you hadn't even really thought it out. You just knew you wanted to do it.
Absolutely. And like I said, I had made this post out there and nobody had reached out to me. And so on April 22nd, I actually had, I made provisions for my dogs and I drove my car up to Eagle's Nest, which is a mountain point up here, with a loaded 45 and no intentions of returning back down. When I had gotten up to Eagle's Nest, there was a truck up there and a couple nearby that was obviously doing some Saturday night session. And there's a couple in a truck that were minding their own. And I sat there waiting for them to leave and I fell asleep. This loaded 45 right on my lap. And I woke up at about 7:30 and the sun is cresting through the mountain peaks. And I'm overlooking this point where the city that I had grown to love is down below. And my phone went off. An older gentleman that I used to drink with at the bar here in town called Coaches. He had listened to me and he said, "Hey, are you still going to try to do the incline today? I will go with you." And so really without thinking, it was him. And then not long after that, I got another message from a random Instagrammer named Daniel Pond.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Hey, let's meet up and go do it." And
Wow.
so I drove my car over there. I hadn't eaten, didn't think to bring snacks. I actually wore leggings. And I had just a pair of thin gloves. And we started off. And it was an amazing experience just for me personally.
What was going through your mind as you took each step?
I was so thankful that I didn't take my life the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Because I never would have seen what it's like up there. Sorry.
That's okay.
You know, I really did not understand the depth of voice and platform until this happened. I did not ask for all the attention that occurred afterwards. In fact, after climbing the incline, Keith and I had a beer down at the tavern in Manitou, and I went home and I went to bed, and I just felt fine with that accomplishment. And I didn't even post up about it until the next day. I didn't realize that it was going to be a history-making moment. And so in the course of the next couple weeks, I ended up meeting with every media affiliate between here and Denver. And I was thrown into this world of cameras and interviews and not really knowing what the heck is going on.
Wow. When you look back on all of that, Mandy, dying 3 times, after the accident, and almost taking your life on the 4th time, do you then start to process that spiritual part of yourself and who God is and why you're here, why you're supposed to be here?
Yeah. Yeah. Every time I thought that I had a clue of what was going on, it seems like somebody else is kind of guiding me along in ways that I can't even really explain. I've been very blessed to have the experiences I've had since my amputation. It's made me grow so much as a person. I went through all of this, the influx and the changes of my life with involving media. And I was very heavily in the depths of alcoholism.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you had become an alcoholic?
I absolutely am an alcoholic. I am in recovery now. I am sober for 2 years and 8 months.
Congratulations, Mandy. That's awesome.
Thank you. It took a long time, and it took a different kind of bottom. I got into some trouble in 2018, the same year that I did the Manitou Incline and mountain. Within a 6-month period, I managed to rack up DUIs that were completely unnecessary and selfish. And so in August of 2018, I was put in jail and made to confront that. I had...
Was all of the attention too much, Mandy, when you really still hadn't dealt with the loss of your legs and having to process life in a whole new way?
It was all way, way too much. A lot of people also don't know that in the background, I lost 2 grandparents within a month, right there, literally a week before I was arrested.
Wow, I'm sorry.
And it was just a lot of compounded emotional trauma, and I had no real idea of how to maneuver everything that was going on. And so I had to come to terms with how to deal with A to Z without alcohol. I was in jail and they put me in a suicide tunic because I had apparently hurt an EMT that was trying to help me. And I'm in front of this judge, similar to this meeting, through a video recording. And I wasn't even on the bond considerations list. They put me on a no bond hold. But this woman in there had gotten me in front of somebody because I was in isolation. They were afraid to put me in general population because of the influx of attention. And so whenever I got in front of that judge, he told me, Mandy, if you're going to kill yourself with this alcoholism, make sure that you don't take anybody out with you. He said, I'm gonna give you this one last chance, and I'm gonna let you out on a personal recognizance bond. What you choose to do with it is up to you. And I was being checked in for sobriety monitoring. And I had actually gotten a phone call from somebody with Colorado Springs Gazette that I had worked with on a couple of stories in the past. And he asked me where I was. And I told him, and he goes, well, I'm going to need you to do a few things for me. I'm going to need you to take Snapchat off of your phone, deactivate your Facebook, don't answer your phone, don't talk to reporters, don't do anything. And he warned me that I was about to face one of the biggest challenges of my life.
This was a different kind of climb.
Oh, yeah. Different kind of climb. So within 24 hours, every media outlet that I had worked with and more, for instance, the Daily Mail had my mugshot next to Kylie Jenner's rump on Snapchat stories. And that was really difficult to deal with because the strong mountain girl wasn't allowed to have a breakdown. I went from being somebody that was trusted, credible, something to look after to, oh man. I mean, the comments are nasty. People were very, very upset, and rightfully so. You know, my actions were selfish. But it was on a global scale that I went through this new shame for my addiction.
How did you deal with that?
I had to put myself in the hospital immediately. I was in my car being checked in for this appointment whenever he had called me and told me about it. And
do you think of trying to take your life again?
I won't lie to you. Yeah, I did. I sure did. But I got a hold of somebody else that has been very influential in my life, Terry Franz, the CEO or founder of Cars for Heroes. And I had been affiliated with him since I was 16. And he goes, Mandy, been in this kind of trouble. I've kind of seen it. I've seen it all. And in his elder wisdom, he kind of comforted me. And he goes, you need to go, and you need to go to the hospital, and you need to just go get in rehab, do what you got to do. Don't mess with the reporters, but you will be fine. And I listened to him. I actually had gotten to the hospital, and I was in pretty rough shape. My blood pressure was at very dangerous levels. And so they admitted me for 3 or 4 days to watch me. And I just shook and shook and shook. And
from the withdrawals?
Yeah. Sweat, cry, puke. It was bad. A lot of people didn't know this, but I mean, even for my on the mountain climb, after climbing the Manitou Incline, I decided to go with Daniel Pond and ascend Pikes Peak. And I had to have him go hang a bear bag of wine so I didn't go into withdrawals on the mountain. I woke up with a glass of wine or something by my bed so that I could handle the day without the shakes. I would say 75% of my interviews back in 2018, I was at some level intoxicated.
Just the fear the
Yeah.
uncertainty.
Absolutely.
You know, Mandy, when we saw your story, I just felt like maybe there was more to your story than what we could see, more than the climb, but there was a deeper meaning for conversation. And I think the deeper meaning is healing and understanding healing and getting success and global adulation before you're really ready. And it can be just as detrimental as that train running over your legs.
Yep.
And really
100%.
finding out who you are and why you are. And you have just been incredible in sharing this very, very hard place. And you know what I say about shame? I say that we have to shame shame. And you shame shame by telling on it. And when you tell on it, it can't hold you hostage.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm not ashamed anymore. And that's why I'm able to talk about it. I used to be ashamed, I'm not going to lie to you. Whenever I was in the hospital, and even after that, I put myself through rehab on my own accord. It wasn't by the judge. And I discovered that I'm not alone,
Mm-hmm.
So many people struggle and are scared to talk about it. And I was like that. I hid for a good few months. I didn't know that I could draw, for instance, until after I quit drinking. And so I just kind of delved into art and staying out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of therapy.
Let me ask you this. That's what I was going to ask you next. Are you in therapy to deal with what happened 6 years ago, 7 years ago, almost?
I am not in therapy for that, but what I am in therapy for is alcoholism. And I feel like that is an even better approach.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's not a whole lot that can be resolved out of that trauma. But what I can do is assure that I'm going to have a future that is not ruled by alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the deeper reasons as to why I was drinking and why I was drinking so heavily has actually been far more beneficial in my life than chasing around answers that I may never have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been about taking accountability for me. Like I said, I'm 2 years and 8 months sober now, but I had to go through a stint in jail. I'm still on probation. I'm actually getting ready to approach the judge on April 5th to ask him for release or termination of my probation status.
Mm-hmm.
It made waves in my life. And I'm so grateful for the mistakes just as much as I am grateful for the summits.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wouldn't be able to handle my life if I had not really sat down and addressed what was going on, and like you were saying, who I am and what I want to do and what I want to see.
And even bigger than that, Mandy, what God has kept you here for.
Yes.
He's kept you here for something so phenomenal. And I can't wait to see what that's going to be. Promise you'll come back and talk with us.
Absolutely.
This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your courage to be open and honest. I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Well, thank you for having me, Carlette.
Indeed. Hey, everybody. Our guest this morning, Mandy Horvath. Stay on point. We're back after this.